Hey guys, tonight we're not sleeping in a trench galloping into medieval battle. Tonight, we're somewhere quieter. You're seated on a thin tatami mat. Your socks are scratchy, the rice smells faintly burnt. And somewhere above you, framed in gold and draped in silence, is the Emperor. He watches you even when your back is turned. Even when you blink, even when you dream. You are 10, maybe 11, and already, you've learned that obedience is more important than curiosity. This is not the story of how you flew. This is the story of how you were taught to disappear politely, correctly, beautifully. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love knowing where these quiet little stories end up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You were raised where obedience grew like bamboo, tall, narrow, and expected to bend in wind, but never break. Your house smells of miso, old sandals, and the sharp polish your mother uses on the family altar. That's where he is, the Emperor. His photo gazes out from above the shrine, nestled between bowls of rice and faint incense smoke that never quite leaves your collar. It's not just decoration. That photo's a commandment. You're taught about it every morning, not as habit, but as belief. This is the world you were born into, a small, wooden house where every breath is measured, and every silence is meaningful. Your father doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. His silence is the punishment. Your mother speaks in gestures. When she refolds your shirt for the third time, it's not about the fabric. It's about your character. Even the neighbors walk quietly. Your friend Takashi once got slapped across the temple for letting a gate swing shut too loudly. The sound wasn't just rude, it was disrespectful to the air itself. Historians still argue whether this kind of structured silence was born of reverence or repression. Maybe both. It's difficult to tell when you're part of it. Your grandmother still talks about the Meiji Restoration like it was yesterday. Before that, she says, we were lost. Now, we are one people. One family. She means the Emperor's family, and by extension yours. By the time you're 6, you know the national anthem by heart. By 7, you can recite the imperial rescript to soldiers. You are not a soldier, but someday, you might be, so you learn it anyway. There's a scroll above your writing desk that says *Makoto, *Sincerity. Your father hung it there when you were 5, after you lied about breaking the teacup. You've never lied since. Even chores feel sacred. The broom is held a certain way. The sandals are arranged precisely. You once spent 15 minutes realigning a pair of shoes before entering a neighbor's home. They weren't yours. That didn't matter. Your school uniform is itchy, the collar too stiff, but you wear it without complaint because to fidget is to frown at your duty. At school, the teachers walk with wooden canes, not for hitting, usually just for tapping. Tap once, stand, tap twice, bow 3 times, sit silently. That's all you need to know. Once, you saw a boy laugh during anthem practice. The teacher didn't strike him. He just tapped the cane 3 times and sent him home. That boy never came back. Rumor says his parents made him shave his head and kneel outside the family's shrine for a week. At night, you dream of airplanes. Not flying them, just watching them from the ground. They buzz overhead like insects with somewhere holy to be. You wave. No one waves back. You try not to think too hard about your cousin, Kenji. He left last spring. Quietly. He was only 17. The letter from the government said something about training for glory. Your aunt framed it. Then she stopped smiling entirely. You've started noticing the red banners around town. The ones with rising suns and slogans that stretch from rooftops to gutters. Serve beautifully. Die with honor. The font is always elegant. There's a word the priest says often. Gize sacrifice. He uses it when blessing the rice harvest. He uses it when your neighbor's husband doesn't return from the north. It means giving something holy, or giving something up. The nuance shifts depending on who's listening. You once asked your teacher why we bow so often. He said, "Because we are not meant to stand at all." You nodded and bowed again. That night, you sat at the family table and peeled radishes for the stew. Your mother corrected the angle of your knife. Even the small things, she whispered, must be straight. Your textbooks abound in thin paper and smell like dust and mildew, but the words inside feel heavier than the pages can carry. Each morning, you slide into your seat like you're entering a shrine, and when your teacher steps into the room, the entire class stands at once, heels together, hands at your sides, eyes down. You bow, not because you're told, but because that's what good students do. You don't call it brainwashing. You don't call it patriotism either. You just call it school. The front of every textbook has the same opening line. The empire is eternal. The emperor is divine. You don't question it. You memorize it. It's written above the chalkboard in your classroom, and occasionally, the chalk dust drifts down and erases the word divine. When that happens, your teacher wipes it clean and writes it again, slowly, carefully, almost reverently. In math, you're taught to count airplanes. In geography, you map out enemy bases. In literature, the poems all end in cherry blossoms and noble deaths. One time, a student asked why the English word for Japan is Japan and not Nihon. The teacher didn't answer. He just wrote tradition on the board in characters so large they looked angry. No one asked again. There's an entire unit in history class about Seigo Takamori, the last true samurai. You're told he died with honor after rebelling against the modern state, but somehow the textbook still calls him a loyal figure. Historians still argue whether he was a traitor or a martyr. In your class, he's just a perfect test answer. On Tuesdays, the principal reads a government bulletin over the loudspeaker while you sit still enough to forget your own heartbeat. It's always filled with words like glory, sacrifice, gratitude, and opportunity. And even though the windows rattle with every syllable, the room remains quiet. You once got a perfect score on a national exam and were given a red armband to wear for a day. It said Model Youth. You wore it so proudly your mother cried, but only in the kitchen, when no one could see. At lunchtime, you bow to your rice bowl before eating. This isn't just etiquette, it's reverence. The rice is from the emperor's land, you were told that. And besides, wasting food would be like disrespecting your entire lineage. The girls in your class learn to sew, to pack emergency supplies, to keep records of who returns and who doesn't. The boys learn formation drills. Even though you don't have uniforms yet, you still practice marching in perfect lines across the schoolyard. Every scuff on your shoe is a lesson in shame. Your teacher always says, a strong nation starts with straight backs. So you sit up even when your stomach aches, even when the summer heat makes the paper stick to your arms, even when the schoolyard reeks of sweat and boiled vegetables. One afternoon, a boy named Masaru brings a comic book to class. It's American. A sailor with a huge chin punches something cartoonishly evil. Masaru is taken to the office. The next day, he's not there. A week later, the teacher removes his name from the attendance scroll. Just like that, vanished. You do not speak his name again. You learn how to chant, not just the anthem, but passages from the rescript on education. Should emergency arise, offer yourself courageously to the state. You don't quite know what emergency means yet, but the word offer lingers in your mouth like old tea. There's a rumor in your town that a boy from the next prefecture volunteered to go to war before his 16th birthday. They say the emperor's portrait was delivered to his mother in person. They also say she smiled. Historians still debate whether these moments were sincere or staged for propaganda. But you believe it. Everyone does. Sometimes you catch your father standing by the window, listening to the radio with the volume turned low. The reports are always vague. Enemy forces advancing. Honor on the battlefield. Glorious sacrifice. And yet, your mother still sets a second pair of chopsticks at dinner. Just in case your older cousin returns. He doesn't. Once a week, you scrub the school floorboards with a rag. There are no janitors. It's supposed to teach humility. It mostly teaches rug burn. But you don't complain, because complaining is a Western trait. And you are not Western. The older you get, the less you speak. Not out of fear, but out of practice. Words are unnecessary when everything is prescribed. You nod, you bow, you listen, you obey. You become a quiet shape that fits into expectations, like a stone fits the riverbed. By the time you're 14, you already know how to iron a uniform. You know how to bow from the waist, from the knees, and from the heart. You know which shoes are worn for ceremonies, and which are for drills. You don't know how to question. You're not supposed to. Sometimes, after class, you sit under the plum tree behind the gym and look up at the branches. They bloom late some years. You wonder if they'll be early this time, because soon, very soon, you're told you'll be growing wings. The letter arrives. While your hands are still dirty, you're in the garden, kneeling beside your father, pressing onion bulbs into the earth. The soil clings to your palms like a second skin, damp and rich with the ash he sifted there last winter. Your back aches slightly, but you don't shift. Movement means you're not focused. And focus is another kind of prayer. The postman doesn't call out. He never does anymore. He just walks up to the gate, bowing deeply, and extends the envelope, with two hands like it's on fire. Your father wipes his hands on his trousers, and takes it with a bow even deeper. He doesn't thank him. That would be redundant. You know the shape of the envelope before you see it. It's cream-colored, uncreased, sealed with red vinyl. It's heavier than paper has any right to be, not physically, just in what it does to air. Your father walks back slowly, eyes straight ahead, and places the letter on a rock beside the basket of spring radishes. He returns to kneeling, doesn't say a word. You finish planting the row before you open it, because to stop halfway would be sloppy. Inside, the message is short, no signature. Just a date, a place, and a phrase you've only seen on bulletin boards before. You have been selected, not drafted, not requested. Selected. Your heart doesn't race, not yet, it just shifts. Like a plate under the floorboards, like something old cracking without ceremony. You show it to your mother without words. She doesn't blink, she just takes the letter, and folds it into quarters, then tucks it into the sleeve of her kimono like it's a receipt. Then she turns back to the laundry and begins unpinning it in order: socks first, shirts last. She doesn't cry. That's not what you do here. Later, she gives you a small cloth bag. Inside is a bar of soap wrapped in wax paper, a handkerchief, and a pair of socks with your name stitched into the hem in red thread, slightly crooked. You don't comment. Your little brother watches from the doorway. He's too young to understand, but just old enough to sense something has shifted in the air. He doesn't ask questions, just eats his rice crackers and watches you tie your travel bag shut. At dinner, no one mentions the letter, not even when your father sets an extra bowl on the table. For practice, maybe, or tradition, or silence. Historians still argue whether families truly felt honored by these letters, or whether they simply knew there was no alternative. After the meal, you sit in the entryway and brush the dirt from your sandals. You arrange them just right, heels together, toes pointed away. You go through your list again: towel, writing brush, spare undershirt. Nothing frivolous. Not even the poem book your grandfather gave you. You almost pack it, almost, but you know better. You write your name in the corner of your rucksack, just once, small, enough to claim it, but not enough to make it matter. You lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling beams, counting the breaths between floorboard creaks. You think about Kenji, your cousin, and how he said goodbye like he was just going to the market. No one said his name after the third week. It's not disrespect, it's preservation. In the early hours, before the birds begin, your mother wakes you with tea. She doesn't say wake up. She just places the cup beside your bed and smooths a wrinkle from your sleeve. She hands you a bento box wrapped in green cloth, the same cloth she used for your lunches in primary school. The rice inside is still warm. You bow. She bows lower. She whispers something about honor. You don't really hear it. The word selected is still ringing like a bell in your chest. At the station, the sky is the same soft blue it was yesterday, but it feels different now. The platform is crowded with boys who look like you. Same hair, same silence. Same rucksacks clutched against their sides, like TALISMANS. No one cries. That part happens in kitchens. After the door closes, when the tea's gone cold, your father doesn't come with you. He's already in the backfield, tying bundles of kindling like always. But he left your sandals perfectly aligned by the door, as if to say, I see you. I know you. That is enough. When the train arrives, it screeches, like it's trying to change its mind. But it doesn't. It never does. You bored. You don't look back. The train smells like rust and old canvas and boys pretending not to sweat. You find a spot by the window, not because you want to admire the view, but because the glass gives you something to look at that doesn't require responding. The countryside blurs by, rice paddies, low shingled homes, a scattering of scarecrows leaning like they know something you don't. Most of the boys on board are your age, a few older. No one talks. Or if they do, it's barely more than a whisper. You hear someone cough behind you and no one says bless you. That's not the mood. You clutch your papers in your sleeve, orders, identification, and the letter you haven't written yet. Across from you, a boy with round glasses and bad posture is trying not to cry. He's doing a decent job. You pretend not to notice the way he keeps rubbing his hands on his knees. You'd rather not notice, because noticing makes things real. Eventually, someone says your name, or something close to it. You glance up. A boy with crooked teeth and a soft Osaka accent asks if he can share the seat. You nod. It would be rude not to. He talks, not constantly, but enough to fill the air. Tells you about his uncle who flew planes during the last war. Brags that he volunteered. Doesn't smile when he says it. Just stares out the window like he's trying to see the past and failing. You ask his name. You forget it 5 minutes later. He asks if you're nervous. You say no. He nods like he believes you. You don't even believe you. Eventually, he drifts off, head leaning a little too close to your shoulder. You shift slightly, keeping your posture. When he wakes up, he thanks you and leaves for another car. You never see him again. The train rolls forward. You practice dying with a brush in your hand. Not literally. Not yet. But everything about this journey feels like rehearsal. You remember the ceremonies you saw as a boy, white gloves, bowed heads, silent teachers. The way everyone spoke softly 4 days afterward, like even their voices were in mourning. At the base, a uniformed man checks your name. Doesn't smile, doesn't look up. He stamps your orders with a dry thump and points you toward the barracks. It's a long wooden building that smells like soap, dust, and too many socks. Your bunk is near the far wall. The mattress is thinner than your school's prayer cushions. It creaks when you sit. The blanket is already folded, precisely, like someone knew you were coming. There's a boy across from you, sharpening a pencil with a knife. Another writes slowly in a notebook. No one speaks. The silence isn't heavy. It's just the background hum of being newly replaceable. You unpack with care. Not because you're proud, but because it feels like the last thing that's yours. Your brush, your ring, your small paper envelope with your family crest. Your name stitched into the corner of your towel. Even these things feel rented. You don't ask what happens next. No one does. At sunrise, you wake to the sound of a wooden clapper. A man in uniform older, slower, but firm calls you to stand. You do, automatically. The day begins, you bow, to the portrait of the emperor in the training yard. The sun hits your forehead at a sharp angle and makes you squint, but you don't move. Not even when a bead of sweat rolls down your neck and disappears into your collar. You kneel, you rise, you salute, you bow again. You're not taught how to dodge. You're taught how to die with grace. There are no lessons in escape. No lectures on victory. Only how to go. You learn the angle of descent. The proper grip. Where to aim. Not for effect. For impact. The manuals are old. The pages smell like smoke and resignation. There are no diagrams of ejection. Only diagrams of embrace. Historians still argue whether this level of ritualized instruction was meant to inspire or anesthetize. You don't care, not anymore. Not when the ink is dry and the uniforms fit. Your instructor doesn't yell, he intones. Commands fall from his lips like prayers. Stand, bow, grip, dive. Each word settles in your bones. Later that night, you try to write a letter. You stop after 3 lines. The brush feels too heavy. Your hand too small. You lie on your bunk, eyes on the ceiling. The boy across from you keeps folding paper cranes. One, then another. Then another. They pile beside his pillow like ghost birds. Each one perfect. He never gives them away. You're handed a manual. It's thin, stiff, printed on coarse paper that smells like it was stored in a damp closet too long. Inside, there are no instructions for evasive maneuvers, no maps of enemy flight patterns, and nothing about coming home. There's no mention of landing at all. Only diagrams, simple ones, clean lines showing the controls, arrows showing descent, circles showing target zones. A final dotted line. Your plane isn't meant to land. And everyone knows it. You practice takeoff. You practice leveling. You practice controlling the glide. You do not practice landing. No instructor ever mentions what to do after, because there isn't one. The silence about it is almost elegant. In one training session, a young instructor with neat hair and a too clean uniform says, "Your body is part of the plane." He says it like it's comforting, like saying you're a spoon and the dish is calling you home. You're made to simulate final dives, holding onto a wooden frame. You grip it tight, lean forward, try to imagine the wind, the sun, the weight of inevitability. Sometimes, someone behind you vomits. No one reacts. You're not supposed to. Later, you sit by the practice yard, watching the other boys try to perfect the angle of their bows as they rise from the knee. It's strange. You've never noticed how much time is spent rehearsing stillness. The meals are the same every day. Rice, radish, maybe dried fish. You chew quietly. You don't finish early. You don't complain. Hunger is just another type of waiting. You start thinking in orders. Stand, dress, salute, kneel, eat. Your dreams begin following that same rhythm. No one mentions tactics. No one draws enemy ships on chalkboards. Instead, you're shown grainy film reels, silent explosions, planes diving into decks, debris flaring outward in a slow blossom of fire and smoke. You're told it's beautiful. You're told you must be part of that beauty. Historians still argue whether pilots genuinely believed it, or whether belief simply didn't matter anymore. One afternoon, your group is taken to see the planes. They're lined up like beetles, dull grey, low to the ground, noses rounded like they've already given up. The red circle on each side glares in the sunlight, perfectly centered, like a target that got bored and turned into a symbol. You're allowed to climb inside one. It smells like oil, old leather, and burnt dust. You sit. The seat is hard. Your knees hit the panel. The yoke feels smooth from too many hands. The instructor beside you asks if you feel ready. You nod. You lie. You go on your first real flight. The next day. Not a mission, just a practice loop. You rise into the sky with your heart pounding like it's trying to escape. The air is clearer than you imagined. The world looks oddly small, like it wouldn't notice if you left it. You're Instructor makes notes the whole time. You make none. You're not expected to. The wind howls around the canopy, but inside the cockpit, it's strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just blank. You follow orders. You take off. You fly straight. You return. You land badly. The instructor shrugs. It's not what you're here for anyway. That night, one of the boys doesn't return. His bunk is empty. The blanket folded perfectly. Nothing under the mattress. No goodbye. You don't ask. You don't need to. Another boy assigned his place before lunch the next day. He's shorter, new, smiles too often, unpacks carefully, places his towel with the embroidery facing up. He still believes there's a right way to sleep. You start to feel your skin thicken, not in a bad way. More like a slow, polite drift away from the things that used to bother you. The meals taste the same. The drills blend. The trees around the base blur together. Everything becomes part of the plane, even you. You learn quickly that silence is a kind of obedience. When the radio is silent, so are you. There's a code in that silence. A mutual understanding that whatever needs to be said has already been absorbed by routine, carved into the rhythm of breath and blink. During flight instruction, you're given a radio headset. It's heavy, smells like dust and someone else's ear. You're taught which channels are monitored, which buttons transmit, and how long to hold them down, but you're also taught not to rely on it. You're told the radio may cut out. You're told there might be interference. You're told you may hear static, or screaming, or nothing at all, and that if that happens, you're to proceed anyway, because silence is not a question. Silence is not uncertainty. Silence is command. 1. Instructor leans in close and says, if you hear nothing, fly straight. You nod. Because it's simple. Because it's terrifying. Sometimes during practice flights, you keep your hand hovering over the button, just to feel it, just to know that you could say something if you wanted, but you don't press it. You don't want to be the one who breaks the quiet. Your bunkmate once told a joke about the silence. He said, if you scream into the radio during your dive, do they archive it? No one laughed, not even him. He didn't fly the next week. And when he did return, his joke stopped. Instead, he folded paper shapes in silence. Not cranes this time, ships, tiny ones, as if trying to build a navy that never left the floor. You stop dreaming of crashing. Now, you just dream of white noise. Even in your sleep, you follow orders. Even your breathing matches the drone of engine hum. The others say nothing about their dreams, but some twitch in their bunks, like they're pulling up from a dive that never ends. Historians still argue how much of the Kamikaze psyche was shaped by silence, by a culture that taught from shrine to schoolhouse that silence isn't absence, it's reverence. One afternoon, you're assigned to simulate radio failure. You're told to climb into a training cockpit, adjust your bearings, and fly blind without response. Your instructor rides in the second seat, says nothing. The engine roars. The sky opens. The only sound you hear, the distant thump of your heartbeat in your helmet. And still, you keep going. You descend, level out, mimic a strike path. The land below could be ocean, or smoke, or nothing. You're not sure anymore. And that's fine, because when the radio is silent, you are not lost. You are expected. At dinner that night, no one mentions the boy who didn't return from his own silent flight, but someone folds his towel, places it on the bunk, not reverently, just correctly. You go to sleep that night with a strange comfort. Not in your chest, no, but somewhere deeper. Like your body has made peace with not knowing. Like silence has made a home behind your ribs. You begin to draw waves. Not because you're an artist. Not because they ask you to, but because land is no longer promised. You sit under the low eaves of the barracks during off hours, sketching curved lines onto rice paper with a brush that still smells faintly of calligraphy ink. The same brush you once used to write letters, or poems, or maybe that final message to your family you're supposed to pen before your mission. But tonight, it draws waves. Endless arcs, coiling, cresting, never breaking. The other boys glance over, but say nothing. One hums an old folk tune through his nose. Another sharpens a pencil he doesn't plan to use. Quiet rituals, like the drawing of waves. They are meant to keep your fingers moving when your heart wants to stop. The old stories say the waves around Japan protect her like a cradle. That the gods place them there to ward off invaders, or carry heroes to the afterlife. You wonder which direction they'll carry you. In training, they showed you naval maps, nothing detailed, nothing strategic, just outlines, curves of islands, the thick blue spaces in between. No cities, no names, just water. You were told to memorize the currents, know how they looked from above, but you still draw them. Again and again. Sometimes at night, you dream of them rising like walls, green-blue towers that shimmer like silk. They don't crash, they wait. They watch, and you fly toward them. One instructor warns you not to focus on the sea. He says, the ocean is not your target. It is only what you fall through. You nod, but still, you draw. Historians still debate whether these drawings preserved in scrapbooks, notebooks, the backs of letters were expressions of fear, or attempts to control what could not be escaped. One letter found after the war ended simply read, "If I become a wave, at least I will move." That one stuck with you. Sometimes, you fold your sketches into shapes, not cranes, not ships. Just folds. Lines that turn into corners, corners into wings. You're told that if you crash into the sea before reaching your target, your name might still be honored. That a failed mission isn't a failed spirit, but that feels abstract because the sea doesn't know your name. Only your mother does. She's the one who taught you to write it, stroke by stroke, in the soft hush of a shared evening. She's the one who gave you your first brush, the one who once traced your cheek with fingers stained in ink. So you draw waves for her. As if they might carry your name back home. Your mother sewed your name into the hem, not in big, bold letters, not where anyone could see it. Just a small, careful stitch, barely visible, inside the lining of your uniform sleeve. You didn't notice it until the third week. The thread was the color of barley, not red or white, and it blended with the cloth like a whisper blends with wine. You ran your thumb over it and suddenly felt 5 years old again. She always did. That. Socks, handkerchiefs, the inside flap of your old school bag. Your name, always quietly present, in thread. She probably dyed herself. You imagine her doing it now, eyes squinting, mouth pressed in, needle moving with something slower than sorrow, because sorrow is loud. And this was quieter than any sadness you'd known. No one talks about their mothers here. That would be indulgent. UNMANLY. But every one of you carries some thread, literal or not, that ties you to a kitchen, or a garden, or a hand that once brushed rice from your cheek. You think of her when you fold your towel, when you smooth your collar, when you wash your hands and dry them gently on your thighs to avoid creasing the linen, because that's what she taught you, not pride, but precision. You wear her care like armor. The government issues you a scarf, white silk, for ceremony. You're told to keep it clean, not for function. Silk won't stop shrapnel, but for beauty. For the photograph. You wonder if she made that too, if someone like her, another mother, sewed these scarves late into the night with hands that trembled only after the candles were out. Historians still wonder how much of Japan's war effort rested on the shoulders of these silent women who never flew, never fought, but hemmed, mended, folded, and grieved like soldiers of cloth and breath. You never see the face of the woman who packed your care kit, but you do see the handkerchief, folded perfectly, pressed. On the corner. Another, stitched name, not yours. Maybe a mistake, maybe a trade. Maybe a final gift from a mother who packed too many to keep them straight. You don't correct it. You carry both names now. When you lie down that night, your wrist rests on your uniform sleeve. You feel the thread again, that tiny raised ridge, where she stitched you into the fabric of something much larger than the wall, and you dream of her voice not speaking, but humming like waves, like thread through cotton, like breath through silence. The mirror is not for vanity, it is for ceremony. You're handed a compact square wrapped in rice paper. Inside polished metal, not glass, not silver. Just enough shine to show your face without flattery. You're told, before flight, you look, once, not to fix your hair, not to adjust your scarf, but to remember who you are and who you were at first. It feels silly. The idea of pausing to gaze at yourself, as if that will make you braver, but the others take it seriously. One boy quiet, with hands that always tremble at mess, he stares into his mirror each night, lips barely moving, like he's trying to memorize his own name before it's forgotten. You try it once. In private, the reflection is strange, slightly warped, edges blurred. You look tired. You look 19. You look like a boy wearing a man's promise. They say mirrors are sacred in Shinto belief, that the sun goddess Amaterasu once hid herself from the world, and the gods used a mirror to coax her back into the light. That's why the mirror became one of the imperial regalia, one of the 3 sacred treasures: a sword, a jewel, and a mirror. Strength, virtue, truth. You have no sword. You've never touched a jewel, but you have the mirror, and it feels heavier than either. Before each practice mission, you're told to bow to the aircraft. It's part of the ritual, a way of acknowledging the machine, just as metal, but as destiny. The instructors use the word shikon, the summoning of spirits. Some think the mirror is there to make sure your spirit is still inside your body, still awake, still willing. Historians still argue whether the use of the mirror was symbolic or superstitious, whether it gave comfort or simply one last illusion of control. You touch the surface once, lightly. It fogs with your breath. The metal is warm now. You close it, wrap it again, and place it with care in your chest pocket, over your heart. That night, you see your reflection in a dream, but not on metal. On water. Still, wide, pale moon above. Your face stares back at you, young and unfinished. You try to speak, but your mouth is full of cotton. And then the dream ends. You didn't choose your plane. It was chosen for you, and it wasn't built to land. They called it the Oka, cherry blossom, a name so poetic you almost forget. It was essentially a manned missile, short wings, sleek body, an engine bolted to a prayer, dropped from a bomber like a gift. No one wanted to unwrap. It carried no wheels, no landing gear, no hope of return. The metaphor wasn't subtle. Cherry blossoms, after all, fall at the peak of their beauty. That's why they're honored. Not because they endure, but because they vanish. A few pilots joked the name should have been Shinitari. One who wants to die, but not out loud, not near the officers, not near the younger boys who still tucked their chins when saluting. They painted your Oka white, not for camouflage, but for ceremony. You're told it symbolizes purity of purpose, clean spirit, sacred offering. It also makes you easier to see. Which, again, is the point. There's a phrase painted above the hangar doors: may your death be as radiant as 1,000 dawns. You stopped looking at it after the second week. The cockpit is small, just big enough for a body and a dream. No cushion, no canopy glass, just thin walls, bolts, and your breath fogging the rim. One handle to steer, 2 to ignite, and a single gauge that doesn't even bother showing fuel levels, because when the engine stops, so do you. Historians still debate the effectiveness of the Oka strategy. Some say it was desperation, others, precision-guided terror wrapped in devotion. You don't argue either way. You just remember the moment they let you touch it for the first time. Not like a pilot, like a monk. You bow. Then they hand you a paintbrush. You're told to write something on the nose, something poetic, something worthy. You think of writing your mother's name. You think of a wave. You think of drawing a door that only opens outward. In the end, you settle for a word you barely understand. Return, painted, in ink that will be dust before the wings catch air. When the radio was silent, so were you. The radio is a small box tucked near your left knee. It crackles, spits, sometimes groans, but rarely speaks, most of the time. It's just there for ceremony. Like the mirror, like the scarf, like the little packet of salt you're told to keep in your shoe to ward off bad spirits. Even though your entire job is to summon one, they tell you you'll hear a phrase before your final dive, just one, a blessing, or a direction, more likely, silence, because silence means everything is going according to plan. If your transmission goes through, someone may whisper, "Fly straight into the light." If they don't, well, you already know where the light is. You practice listening more than you practice flying. Sitting in rows on tatami mats, headphones snug, eyes closed, you're trained to pick out commands beneath static, learn the pattern of breath between syllables, guess the rank of a speaker from how long they pause before saying your name. You're told the radio is sacred. Not for communication, but for confirmation. And if you hear nothing, you still obey. That's the lesson. You act whether or not the world speaks back. Historians still argue about how many pilots truly heard their final order. Some say hundreds dove in complete silence, guided only by instinct and wind. Others insist there was always a voice, if not from command, then from memory. You believe both, because even without sound, you always hear something, your own breathing, the slight rattle of the harness, the creak of metal around you. Once, you thought you heard your name in the static, but not from the ground, from the sky. As if the wind itself whispered it back, slowly, like an old friend to polite ask why you hadn't written. That night, the radio hums as you fall asleep. You keep the headphones on. Not for instructions, but for company. Even static is better than being alone in your head, especially when it sounds like waves. You drew waves, because land wasn't promised any more. It started as a doodle. Just a few lazy lines in the corner of a notebook curved, repeating, rhythmically spaced like breath. Waves. At first, you didn't know why. Maybe it was the way your instructor described the ocean, constant, disloyal, and always hungry. Or maybe it was the training manual that referred to your final mission as a splashdown. Whatever the reason, waves started showing up everywhere. In your notebook margins, etched into the wood of your bunk, carved into the leather of your flight gloves with the tip of a sewing needle. You weren't alone. One boy carved mountains. Another drew birds, but most of you, waves, because land was becoming a myth, because the sky had rules, but the sea accepted you as dashes. They told you that if you missed your target, you'd go into the ocean. They didn't say what would happen after. You were never trained for water landings. There were no rescue drills, no flotation devices. You asked once quietly what to do if you lived through the crash. Your officer smiled, not kindly. Just quietly, he said. You won't. Historians still wonder whether kamikaze pilots believed in an afterlife in the way Western soldiers did. Some records suggest you were taught to picture yourself as a spirit already disembodied, ascending into war memory before your body even left the ground. But you just pictured waves, some peaceful, some loud. And sometimes you dream you were already underwater, not drowning, just drifting, weightless, unnamed. One boy embroidered waves into his scarf hem. Another painted them on his flight panel. Someone else carved them into the edge of his mirror. You began to think the sea might remember you even if your country didn't, because countries forget, but the ocean keeps everything. Your name, your scarf, your last breath. It all sinks. The same. And still, you draw one more wave just above your sleeping mat. It looks like a smile, but you know better. Your mother sewed your name into the hem, not in bold, not in red, just a soft, slanted line of thread tucked inside the collar of your undershirt where it wouldn't be seen by the officers or by your fellow pilots or even by you, unless You reached for it. And of course you reached for it. Almost every night, like a child with a lucky pebble. The thread was darker than the cloth, but not black. Midnight blue, perhaps, or a shade of ink worn down by weather and prayers. She wrote it in kanji, but stylized it, softening the edges like a whispered nickname. You didn't ask her to do it. She didn't ask if she could. It just appeared. One morning, after a visit home, a folded shirt in your bunk. No note. Just the name, her handwriting. You recognized the way she made the top stroke of the second character to long. She always did that. Even in school notes or birthday cards. When you were 5, you never told her you noticed. She would have blushed, said something about being careless, and laughed too quickly to hide the grief rising behind it. The instructors told you not to carry anything sentimental. No photographs, no trinkets, no written letters in your coat pockets. Sentiment, they said, softens the aim, but thread isn't sentimental. Thread is functional. Thread is what holds things together. Historians still debate how much personal ritual was permitted in Kamikaze barracks. Some records suggest tight restrictions. Others describe young men keeping pressed flowers in books or carving family crests under their floorboards. There's no consensus, just 1,000 tiny threads lost to fire and water. You don't sew. You never learned, but you did trace the stitches with your fingertip every night, not to pray. Not even to remember. Just to know it was real. That someone made something for you. Not for glory. Not for duty. Just for you. A single name, where no one else would see it. So that when the shirt burned, and the body vanished, and the sea forgot, someone's hands would still remember how to write your name. The mirror was not for vanity, but for ceremony. You didn't look to see how you looked. You looked to see if you were still there. A small, round mirror, polished metal set into lacquered wood, placed on a low stand beside your bunk. Every morning, before formation, every night, after prayers, the same ritual. Sit, breathe, bow, look, and ask yourself the question one dares to say aloud. Are you still the same person who said yes? Not that you really said it, not out loud. You signed a paper. You bowed at the right times. You didn't run. In many eyes. That was enough. But the mirror didn't care about military protocol. It didn't salute. It didn't judge. It just offered you back, unflinching, unchanging. Even as you tried to become someone else, some boys couldn't look for long. They'd glance, adjust their collars, and move on. Others stared, trying to memorize their own eyes. In case it was the last time. You weren't supposed to keep the mirror. It was supposed to be shared to a room. But yours never moved. No one asked for it. Maybe they knew you needed it more. Maybe they were afraid of what they'd see. Historians still debate the role of personal reflection in the Kamikaze Code. Some accounts describe the mirror as part of purification rituals borrowed from Shinto traditions. Others say it was just habit, a civilian echo from childhood routines. No one knows for sure. But you do remember one morning the day before someone's final flight. A boy sat at the mirror for too long. An officer knocked his knuckles on the frame. "You're not here to admire yourself," he barked. The boy didn't flinch. He just said, "I was making sure it was still me." Then he folded his scarf, bowed, and left. The mirror stayed. It always did. Later that night, you catch your own reflection again, and you try something new. You smile, just a little, just to see if you still can. It doesn't last, but the mirror remembers. The last night doesn't feel like a last night. No fireworks, no speeches, no final letter from the Emperor slipped under your door. Just the soft rattle of cups in the mess hall, the low thrum of rain on the tin roof, and the sound of someone folding laundry 2 bunks down. Ordinary things. Unremarkable things. You think that's the cruelest part. You expected something louder. Your officer says your name during roll call. No emotion, no emphasis. As if it were any other day, he tells you your orders will arrive before sunrise. That's all. No nod. No thank you. just a date and a direction. The others don't say much. No one asks how you feel. No one offers comfort, because comfort means fear, and fear isn't supposed to exist here. You all learn that lesson early. Instead, a boy passes you a rice ball, wrapped in cloth still warm. No words. You nod. He nods. That's enough. You don't sleep. Not really. You lie on your back, hands on your chest like a shrine statue, eyes flicking between shadows on the ceiling. You count your breaths. You count the waves on the scarf edge. You think of the thread in your collar, of the mirror, of the radio's hum, and of a poem your mother used to recite when you were small. When the sparrow lands, it does not ask the branch permission. You never knew what it meant. You still don't. But you say it now, under your breath, again and again, like a spell, like a superstition, like a reason. Historians still argue whether kamikaze pilots believed what they'd been taught about honor, sacrifice, reward. Some suggest it was blind nationalism. Others say it was peer pressure or fear of shame. You don't know anymore. Maybe it was all of it. Maybe it was none of it. But dawn is coming, and the scarf is tied, and the engine is warm. You step out into the pre-light hush, the grass slick beneath your boots, and you whisper to no one, I am ready. Are you? The hum of the engine fades now. Gently, like a song reaching its last note. You're no longer on the airstrip. Not really. You're somewhere softer, warmer, with less metal and more sky. You remember the scarf, the thread, the rice ball. The sea no longer threatens. It simply waits, because the ocean, like sleep, doesn't judge. It just holds. And carries. And remembers. Your body relaxes now. Shoulders release. Fingers unclench. You don't need to be brave anymore. There's no one to impress. No one to salute. No one counting how still you sit, how straight you bow. You are uncounted. UNWATCHED. Unburdened. Let the last image be not of fire or noise but of fabric, a small patch of cotton, stitched with a name only one person ever used. Let that name drift. Let it fade slowly, like ink in rain. You are not forgotten. Not here. Not tonight. You are simply returned. To waves. To memory. To quiet. Sleep now, gentle one, and let the mirror darken. It no longer needs to show you anything, because you are already where you were always meant to be. Held. Softly. Completely. At last.